Thank you. All right, so on the review that I gave you this week for you guys to work on at whatever day you guys were here because of ASVAB, on number 1, it says to solve by graphing. So for this particular thing, when we want to solve x squared minus 2x minus 8 equals 0 by graphing. When you solve by graphing, the first step that you need to do is make sure that it's equal to 0. If it's equal to 0, then you're set up and ready to go. If it's not equal to 0, move everything to one side. Okay? So if I said that if I had stuff all over the place, I would want to move everything to one side versus the other. But for this problem, it's equal to 0. I can start. Now, depending on whether you use a TI graphing calculator or you're using your Desmos calculator, it doesn't matter. You're going to get the same answer regardless. If you use your TI calculators, after you push the on button, you push y equals and then you type the equation in. What you type in is you only type in this part here. You do not type the equals 0. If you're using a Desmos calculator, you only type in this. You do not type equals 0. And I think in some of you asked me that earlier. You were wondering why it was not giving you a parabola. It was giving you like 2 straight lines. And that was because you guys were typing the equals 0 in there. So it was doing something different. Okay? Do not type the equals 0. Then, when it graphs, and I'd show you a picture, but as soon as I do that, it stops the recording. And I want to record this for those people who are gone. Okay? So I'll kind of rough the picture in, all right? So when I type that in, x squared minus 2x minus 8, I get a picture that does something like this. How's my parabola today? Looks pretty good, doesn't it? Looks pretty. All right, so then it goes like this. 1, 2, 3, and then hits here. So then when you're doing this by graphing, all you're looking for is where does it hit the x-axis? What numbers? And if you look at the ones that we ever gave you, most of them were never at decimals. They were at whole numbers. So all you're going to do is count. This is right here at -2, and this one was right here at +4. So my answers for number 1 are -2 and +4. Does that make sense how I did that? Again, I just typed that into a graphing device. Whether you use your Desmos on your Chromebook or whether you're using a TI calculator, it's going to give you the same answer. Okay, that's number 1 on the review. Number 2 has 3x squared minus 4 equals 8. And it says solve the equation using square root or factoring. So it's giving you options. Now, some of the options are better than others. In this particular option, factoring would be horrible. I want to square root, and here's why. If you have a problem where it's only x squared in the problem and there's no other x, then square rooting is the best play. It's the fastest play. If it has other x's involved, then you can't use square rooting as it looks. But because there is no other x in the problem, we're good to go as it is. So when I use square root to solve this, I need to get rid of all the other material or get rid of all the other pieces. So the first thing I get rid of is I get rid of the 4. How do I do that? Add it. 8 plus 4 is 12. Then, second thing I get rid of is any multiplying or dividing. How do I get rid of a multiply by 3? Divide by 3. X squared equals 4. Then when you have it like this, how do you get rid of square? You root it. X equals, and here's the part that a lot of people forget. What? Plus or minus or positive and negative, good. And what's the square root of 4? 2. So my answer is plus or minus 2 for number 2. Don't forget the plus or minus. Maybe put that on your note card. Say, don't forget plus or minus, so you don't forget that. Farrah. Say that again.
I did it a little bit differently, but I got the same.
Okay. Did you factor it? Because you could have.
I did square root it, except I put it equal to 0, put it 8 into the equation, and then dividing negative 4 negative 8.
Okay, so you kind of did the same thing. All right. So number 3. X squared plus 6x minus 16 equals 0. You cannot square root this one as it looks. There is no way you can square root that, and the reason why is because you have x squared in the front and then you have an x in the middle. When you have x squared and an x, you cannot use square root. You have to use factoring, and only because it says factoring here. If you really wanted to, could you have done completing the square? Could you do that way too? Like realistically, you can. But the directions say to use square root or by factoring. So I wanted you to practice that is what I was getting down to. So when you're factoring, the first thing you need to do is make sure it's equal to 0. Is it equal to 0? Yes. Then, second thing. I see what times what can give me x squared. What times what gives me x squared? X times x. What times what gives me negative 16 but adds up to be 6? What times what gives you negative 16 but adds up to be 6? Positive 8 and minus 2. When I multiply those two numbers together, I get negative 16. But when I add them together, I get 6. Does that make sense? Then, once you have factored it, you set each group equal to 0. X plus 8 equals 0. X minus 2 equals 0. Subtract 8 to both sides. X equals negative 8. Add 2 to both sides. X equals 2. And that's number 3. How you guys feel about that so far? So far, so good? All right. Number 4 has 2x squared minus 17x equals negative 30. Now, on this problem, I cannot use square root here either, again, because you have x squared and you have an x in the problem. So you cannot use square root. So we need to factor. When you're factoring, you have to set it equal to 0. Is it equal to 0? Nope. So I need to add 30 to both sides. 2x squared minus 17x plus 30 equals 0. Then the next thing you want to do is you want to ask yourself, is there anything I can take out of all 3 terms to begin with? And the answer is no. Because what can I divide out of a 2, a 17, and a 30 that's the same number? Nothing. So I set up my 2 sets of parentheses. What times what gives me 2x squared? What times what gives me 2x squared? 2x and x. Good. Because the back sign's positive and the front sign's negative, I know they're both going to be negative. Then what happens to many people is they fall in this trap. When I say what times what gives you 30, they're going to automatically gravitate towards 2 and 15. Because 2 and 15 would make 17, and I get that. However, you have a 2 in the A spot. So that's not going to work. Because if I put 15 and 2 in there, when I check the O and the I parts of FOIL, I'm going to get 19, not 17. So you got to be careful. You cannot use 2 and 15 for this problem. So if 2 and 15 do not work, Anybody have a solution for me? Bless you. Huh? 1 times 15? Not going to make 30, Abby. What times what gives you 30? 5 and 5 times 12 is a little bit too high. 5 times 6 though. Okay, so let's try that. 5 and 6. And again, if I check the O and the I parts of FOIL, 2 times 6 would be negative, in this case, negative 12. And negative 5 times x would be negative 5x. And when I combine them, that gives me negative 17. You found the right grouping. Okay? Once you find the right grouping, you set each of those parentheses equal to 0. So 2x minus 5 equals 0. X minus 6 equals 0. On the first one, I add 5 to both sides. And then divide by 2. So I get x equals 5 halves. Or 2.5 or 2.5, whichever one you have. On the second one, if I add 6 to both sides, I get x equals 6. And that's number 4. Number 5. Number 5 is probably the longest problem you have on this worksheet. Requires the most work to do. So first of all, it says a rectangular enclosure. How's my rectangle today? Pretty good. I'm on fire with my shapes. At the zoo is 35 by 18. The zoo wants to double the area. Oh, it gives you a key word there, area. How do you find the area of a rectangle? Length times width. So anybody know what 35 times 18 is? 630. And if I want to double that, that means to multiply it by 2. So what's 630 times 2? 1,260. The zoo wants to double the area of the enclosure by adding the same distance to the x to the length and the width. Meaning, they're going to add out a bump out here and a bump out there. So they're going to make the place bigger for the animals by x and by x. So that means this. The length of that is now going to be x plus 35, and the width of that is going to be x plus 18. Notice I'm adding the same distance to both sides. Does that make sense how I set that up? Now, write and solve an equation to find the value of x. So now the next one is you have x plus 35, and just like we just were told that area is found by taking length times width, times x plus 18 should equal 1260 because that was our new area that we wanted. So the first thing I'm going to do is not do this. Do not set those equal to the 1260 and try to solve for x. That's not going to work. You have to FOIL this out first. So x times x is x squared. X times 18 is 18x. 35 times x is 35x. And 35 times 18 is 630. Now, if you want to solve this by factoring, because in this case that's what we're working with, I'm going to subtract 1260 to both sides. Now I'm going to combine like terms. I have x squared here. What's 18 plus 35? Does anybody know? What, 18 plus 53? Good. Does anybody know what 630 minus 1260 is? Negative 630 equals 0. Now what I need to do is I need to factor this. And this is where it gets a little bit tougher because you got to try to figure out what times what gives you 630, but adds up to be 53. So I'm going to help you. So the first thing I thought of, instead of going, well, 2 goes in there 315 times and 3 goes in there 210 times, I looked at it this way. 630 ends in 0, correct? What if I divide that by 10? What would I get? 63. Oh, I got a 63 and a 10. Can I use 63 and 10 somehow to make a 53? If I subtracted them, right? So x plus 63, x minus 10. Because if I multiply 63 times negative 10, I get negative 630. But when I add them, I get positive 53. Does that make sense how I reason that out? Okay, and just thankful it worked for us. Now, if I set each of those groups equal to 0, I get x plus 63 equals 0, which would mean subtract 63 to both sides. And I get x equals negative 63. Now I need to ask you a question because I know you're smart. Kyler, can you have a negative distance? No. So this part here gets thrown out the window. I cannot have a negative distance. I can't go back 63 feet. Wouldn't even make the pen, right? They want to add to it. If I do the other one, x minus 10 equals 0, I get x equals 10 when I add 10 to both sides. Now, to answer the other question for it, it says, what are the new dimensions? Remember, it was a 35 by 18, but I'm adding 10 feet to each side. So what's 35 plus 10? It's a 45 by, and what's 18 plus 10? That's a 45 by 28. Now, here's something that you can do for this to make sure you got it right. Somebody in a calculator take 45 times 28. How much? 45 times 28 is 1260. Where was 1260 on the screen? When I doubled the area. So does this, when I take the length times the width, equal double the area? Yes, it does. So guess what? You did it right. If you didn't, it would not have worked out that way. Okay? That's number 5. I'll tell you in a second. Number 6. I hope number 6 is some of the easiest stuff that you guys have. Are you done, Tim? Okay. All right, I'll put it in there today. All right, so for this one, here's what you do, because I know some of you have asked me this question like this before. Where's the x? It's next to the 4. It's in the front on the right-hand side. So since it's on the front on the right-hand side, then you set it equal to the front of the left-hand side, and vice versa. So if that's 4x in the front right, then it has to equal the front left. The front left is how big? 36. So 36 equals 4x. How do you solve for x? Divide by 4. Anybody know what 36 divided by 4 is? 9. And that's the number, not German for no, right? Okay. See, look at us, bilingual today. Okay, where's the I? Where's the Y, I mean? Next to the I on which side, left or right? It's on the left side. So if it's on the left side, then you need to set it equal to what's on the right side in that spot. Does that make sense? You need to match the spots together. So I have negative yi equals 3i. How do I solve for y?
You subtract I first, or you divide by 3?
Not divide by 3.
Or divide by negative
I divide by negative
1?
I. Yep. Negative 1i, yes. because I want to get the y by itself. Okay? So if I do that, these i's cancel, the negatives cancel, leave me y. These i's cancel here, and what's 3 divided by negative 1? Negative 3. And that's number 6. How do you guys feel about that kind of question? You guys okay with that one? Okay, that could honestly be some of the easiest ones you have. Like, just set them equal and move it. Like, you got it. Okay? Then, number 7 has negative 2 plus 3i plus 7 minus 6i. You need to be careful. It happens every year. I get people that get this problem wrong because they just start foiling. Am I asking you to foil? Why not, Shay?
Because it has the plus sign.
It has the plus sign, right? So that just means I'm just asking you to combine like terms. Don't mess that up. So negative 2 plus 7 is how much? What's negative 2 plus 7? 5. Awesome. And then what's 3i plus negative 6i? Huh? Close. Negative 3i. Because you had a negative was the higher value. And that's my final answer for that one. Number 8. 9 plus 3i minus negative 2 minus 7i. Am I asking you to FOIL? No. Don't. Combine like terms. What's 9 minus negative 2? What's 9 minus negative 2? 11. Because the two negatives would make it a positive 2, so it'd end up being 9 plus 2, so it would be 11. What is 3i minus a negative 7i? 10i. Because those two negatives would make it a positive. Number 9. 5 plus 6i. Negative 4 plus 7i. Now you are foiling because there's no symbol in between them. You need to foil on this one. This is the only one on this page that you had to foil on. Okay? So, what's 5 times negative 4? Negative 20. What's 5 times 7i? 35i. What's 6i times negative 4? And what's 6i times 7i? Does anybody recall what I squared is equal to? Negative 1. So that ends up being 42 times negative 1. What's 42 times negative 1? Negative 42? So then what's negative 20 minus 42? Negative 62. Good. What's 35i minus 24i? 11i. Now it's number 9. Hey, number 10 has 7x squared plus 21 equals 0. And when you're asked to solve, you got to get x by itself. Now, when you're looking at this one for x being by itself, you're not going to use factoring because there's only one x. So you might as well use square root. When you're using square root, the first thing you want to do is you want to get rid of any adding and subtracting. Is there any adding and subtracting to get rid of? Yeah. Minus 21 to both sides. So I have 7x squared equals negative 21. Then you want to get rid of the multiplying or dividing. So I'm going to divide everything by 7. X squared equals what? What's negative 21 divided by 7? Negative 3. Third thing you want to get rid of is you want to get rid of any square. How do you get rid of square? You root it. X equals plus or minus, don't forget. And what do I do with a negative? Take an I out. Can you reduce the square root of 3? No. So I root 3, and there's nothing more to finish with that problem. That's number 10. Number 11 has f of x equals 2x squared plus 32. And it says find the zeros. When it says find the zeros, it's the same thing as you saying solve the equation. Okay? It's the same thing. The only difference is I put a 0 in where f of x was. So does this problem that's on the right now look like the problem that was on the left? Different numbers, but it's the same process. That's my point. So I'm going to subtract 32 to get rid of first. I'm going to divide everything by 2 next. And what's the third thing I got to do? Root it. Plus or minus, I didn't forget. What do I do when there's a negative underneath? Pull your eye out. Okay, on the paper, not literally. Okay, Tyler? Just making sure. And what's the square root of 16? 4. So 4i. Okay, that's number 11. Number 12, an employee at a local stadium is launching t-shirts from a t-shirt cannon into the crowd during an intermission of a football game. That doesn't matter. The height, h, in feet of a t-shirt after t seconds can be modeled by h equals negative 16t squared plus 96t plus 4. That's the important part. Find the maximum height of the t-shirt. Now, you can do this 2 ways. The first way that you can solve this problem is by putting it in vertex form. That's the first way that you can solve this problem, is make this in vertex form. And the reason why is because we want to know what the vertex is. That's where the maximum height goes. If I were to take a t-shirt cannon and launch one to Jaden in the back, right? I'd be doing it here so it would have a nice arc to get to you, right? That's a parabola. So basically what I'm doing is I'm finding the maximum. I'm finding the vertex. So putting it in vertex form will tell you that. A second way of doing this, if you recall from chapter 2, was by taking x equals negative b over 2a and then just plugging that number into the equation. Now, I want to make sure you guys are aware of something. I don't care which way you do this, but I'm going to make a suggestion. If you want to do this and actually do, and it not take so long, I would not do I would not do this one. Vertex form is going to be more of a challenge. The reason why. What number is in the A spot for this problem? Negative 16. Does negative 16 reduce into 4 evenly? No, you got fractions going on. And more than likely, when you do it in vertex form, you're going to miss a part, and then it's going to be all sorts of wrong. So I'm going to make a suggestion. If you want to save yourself some time and a big headache, don't use vertex form. What number's in the B spot? 96. What number's in the A spot? Does anybody know what's 2 times negative 16? And what's negative 96 divided by negative 32? What's negative 96 divided by negative 32? 3. Good. What that means, you guys, is the height, it's going to reach the maximum height. So me shooting this t-shirt gun to Jaden back there, after 3 seconds, it's going to hit the high point. Okay? Now, how high did it get? That's what it's asking, correct? Negative 16 times 3 squared plus 96 times 3 plus 4. I can stick that in a calculator, no problem, and come up with the right answer. Okay? So negative 16 times 3 squared plus 96 times 3 plus 4 is, anybody know? Anybody got a calculator that's willing to do it?
I have 148.
148. Good. So did I. So that means that the height of that t-shirt went 148 feet. So if I wanted to get it to Jaden, and he was way in the back, right? That thing would have been launched 148 feet in the air and got to him. That's what that means. Now, again, if you would have wanted to do it with vertex form, you would have had to factor out the negative 16. You would have had to do the b over 2a thing. You would have had to make sure you add and subtract the same number to both on the side. But the negative 16 plays a part in it, and it gets all sorts of wonky. So that's the easiest and fastest way, I promise. 13. When you're solving by completing the square, the first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that it's a is 1. Is a 1? Yes. Step 2, you need to move the constant to the other side. Which one's the constant? How do I move it? Subtract 17. Nice job. X squared plus 16x equals negative 17. So make sure you leave your gap. Step 3, take b divided by 2 squared to both sides. What number is in the b spot? 16. 16 divided by 2 is? Try that again. 8. What's 8 squared? 64. So I'm going to add 64 here and add 64 there. Step 4, factor. What times what gives me x squared? What times what gives me 64 but adds it to be 16? 8. Remember, that number I'm writing is the same number as this number in the squared part. They're always going to be the same. Then what's 64 minus 17 on the other side?
47.
How much?
47.
Thank you, Kyler. Then how do I get rid of square? Root it. I get x plus 8 equals plus or minus the square root of 47. If the square root of 47 would reduce, I would reduce it. But guess what? 47 is a prime number, so it isn't going to reduce. Then the last step is to solve for x. How do I do that? Subtract 8. And I get x equals negative 8 plus or minus root 47. What time is this one done? 46?
Yep.
Okay, so still got 10 minutes. Number 14. 4x squared plus 16x plus 25 equals 0. Is a 1? No. In order to make it, you got to divide everything by the number that's in the A spot. In the A spot is the number 4. So I'm going to divide everything by 4. Here 4, everywhere 4, 4. What's 16 divided by 4? 4. 25 divided by 4 does not come out evenly. It's kind of gross, but that's okay. And what's 0 divided by 4?
2.
Right. Step 2, move the constant. So I'm going to subtract 25/4 to both sides. X squared plus 4x equals negative 25/4. Step 3, take the b divided by 2 and square it. What number is 4 squared, or 4 divided by 2 squared? What's 4 divided by 2? 2. What's 2 squared? 4. Add 4. Add 4. Factor. What times what gives me x squared?
X.
What times what gives me 4 but adds it to be 4? 2. On the right-hand side, we got a dilemma. We got a fraction with a whole number. So what I'm going to do with that is put the fraction, or the whole number, over 1. Now I got to get a common denominator. What's the common denominator between 4 and 1? 4. So I got to multiply this by 4 and that by 4. Lots of 4s going on today. What's 16 times 4? I said the answer. Ugh. What's 4 times 4? Good Lord. So now, once I have the common denominators, now I'm going to just add or subtract the tops together. Does anybody know what negative 25 plus 16 is?
9.
Close. Negative 9. Negative 9 over 4. Then how do I get rid of square? Root it. I get x plus a deuce equals plus or minus. Don't forget to take that out. What do I do with the negative? I. And then when you have a fraction, you do them separate. What's the square root of 9? 3. Well, that came out nice. What's the square root of 4? 2. Well, that came out nice too. So I don't have any more house, right? Now, how do I keep going and solve for x? Subtract 2. So I get x equals negative 2 plus or minus 3/2 I. Number 9. We got to start moving a little bit quicker. First thing is, I don't like the setup of this problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute this in. I want to get rid of those parentheses. I don't like them. So I've got that instead. Now I'm going to start. Is A1? No. How do I make it? Divide everything by 9. Boom, boom, boom. X squared minus, anybody know what 54 divided by 9 is? 6. Good. 9. All right, now what number's in the B? Negative 6, right? Good. What's negative 6 divided by 2? Negative 3. What's negative 3 squared? 9. Add 9. Add 9. No, it should be positive 9. Because you have a negative times a negative should be a positive. Okay? Now, factoring it. What times what gives me x squared? X. What times what gives me 9 but adds it to be negative 6? Good. What's 9 plus 9? Awesome. Now what? I root it. X minus 3 equals plus or minus. Ooh, 18 does reduce. Let's do that over here on my scratch paper. Does 2 go into 18? Yep, 9 times. 3 goes in there 3 times, and 3 goes in there once. I got a pair of 3s with a deuce left over. Add 3 to both sides. I get x equals 3 plus or minus 3 root 2. That's number 15. And the last one. Y equals x squared minus 2x plus 20. And when you want to write this in vertex form, remember you take the x's and put them together, and then you push the constant over. So y equals x squared minus 2x, and I push the constant off to the side. Then I take whatever's in the b spot divided by 2 squared. What number's in the b? Negative 2 divided by 2 is how much? Negative 1. What's negative 1 squared? 1. Add 1, minus 1. Remember, you got to do the same thing right away, back to back, right? Then what times what gives me x squared is x and x. What times what gives you 1 but adds it to be negative 2? And again, I'm just factoring this part. What times what gives me 1 but adds it to be negative 2? Negative 1, good. And then these two pieces I just combine together. What's 20 minus 1? 19. You have successfully wrote it in vertex form. That's what you have to do to make it in vertex form. Then to identify the vertex, what way do I move when it's a minus 1 on the inside? I go to the right. Right is positive, isn't it? And what way do I move when it's a plus 19 on the outside? Up 19. So that would be a positive 19. So you've just identified the vertex. That's the review. Now, the moment you've really all been waiting for is how does it relate? Right? Number 1 on your test tomorrow says solve the equation using factoring. So which questions were solved by factoring? 3 and 4. Okay, so 3 and 4 from the review is like number 1 on your test. 2 and 3 say solve the equation using completing the square. 13, 14, and 15 were solved by completing the squares. 4 and 5, we put solve the equation using whichever method you prefer, which means we don't care which way you solve it. So you can do them by graphing, square rooting, factoring, or completing the square. It's your choice on those two, okay? That's the first page of your test. Number 6, write it in vertex form and identify the vertex. Which problem was like that on the review? Which problem said vertex and write in vertex form? Number 16? 16 on the review is like number 6 on your test. 7 and 8 say perform the indicated operation and write the answer in standard form, meaning we only gave you 2 of them. And on those ones like 7, 8, 9 on your review, you had 3 of them. You had an add, a subtract, and a multiply. On the test, you only have 2 of them. Number 9, find the values of x and y that satisfy the given condition, just like number 6 does. And number 10 is a word problem. And that's it. There's 10 questions. So again, I will have this, I have this recorded. I'm going to hit stop. I'm going to upload it to Google Classroom. It will be on the stream if you guys want to hear it again. Okay? Those of you who are ASVABing, I recorded this. I will put it on the stream in Google Classroom if you want to go back and listen to the first part of the review. Okay?